Okay, welcome back. Sorry about that. Lost our connection. That's what happens, I suppose. But so just quick rundown again. Military sexual trauma is a problem in our population, so it's definitely worth discussing with our men and women. And again, the important things to remember is if this comes up in a discussion in your clinic, folks with this, they don't have to have a retirement check. They don't have to have a disability rating. They don't have to have anything other than saying, I was a victim of military sexual trauma. I'd like to get some care, and the VA will help them. Every VA has a designated military sexual trauma coordinator. There's a link at the bottom there for some more information, but they really are taking this seriously, and we're really trying to address these problems that may not have been adequately covered in the past. And again, the focus had traditionally been on female service members, but there are a significant number of male service members. Again, this isn't necessarily contact. This can be sexual harassment, hazing, those types of things. And there definitely have been instances of that within the military in the past. So we want to make sure we take care of those members and know that they can seek help free of charge. So all these mental health things that add up, again, the big focus is suicide. Anytime a service member takes their life, you survive multiple deployments, firefights, and then you come home and the trauma of that and constantly just reliving it or not being able to, get back into family life, find a job. I mean, some of these members really do have a tough time going out and trying to fit back into society. You've been on that heightened alert status for, let's say, 3 or 4 tours or 3 or 4 years of your life. You're conditioned different. Your brain's been rewired, and some folks really have a harder time adjusting than others. And it's not going to be the old crazy-looking, Vietnam vet that we think of. Some of these boys will walk in, these females will walk in, very clean-cut, put together. You think they're just fine, but you start digging a little deeper, and you can get some of this information out from them. And again, you want to look for the things like some type of mood disorders, anxiety, depression, PTSD. Have they had some type of traumatic brain injury? Doesn't necessarily mean they were blown up. They could have had an accident downrange. All of these things we want to look for. But if you're going after statistics, 18% of all suicides in the U.S. were committed by veterans, but we're only 8% of the population, 8.5% of the population. Which again is alarming. And nationally, your middle-aged white males are at your highest risk for suicides. And 65% of vets who died by suicide were over 50. So again, this is maybe the tail end of the Vietnam guys, but this is really Gulf War I and II, folks. Rural male vets, we all know living in rural communities, you have these problems just by being a member of a rural community. These things can happen. But if you're a rural vet, major depression, anxiety, this all increases your risk for suicide. And we also don't want to forget our female veterans, because they are 2.4 times higher than civilian females for suicide. And the rate of suicide for the youngest cohort of women vets, so these are your 18 to 25-year-old, was 7 times higher than civilians. So, although it is statistically more of a middle-aged male problem, you were seeing higher rates of suicide in these young, female veterans who have deployed multiple times. Now 7 times is something really to pay attention to. You may only see 1 or 2 in your entire time you're in your practice, but, really ask those questions that maybe can reveal maybe some problems that they're having. And on top of that, back to the military sexual trauma, women service members are more likely to have an administrative record of a sexual assault, and those females have an elevated odds ratios for PTSD and a suicide attempt. So let's say you have someone in your clinic, it's actually recorded that they have had a sexual assault in the past. These females are more likely to, of course, been traumatized by it, and then, of course, commit suicide because of it. And 51, now this is during their lifetime, 51% of female veterans reported a sexual assault during their lifetime. This doesn't necessarily mean it happened during their service career, but 51% of female vets reported having some type of sexual assault in their lifetime, and that's from the Journal of Women's Health down there on the bottom. And although, even though you're a victim of a military sexual trauma or say sexual assaults recorded, the females may not always enroll in that VA healthcare. They may not, because there's a perception that it's a male-dominated service. But so we really got to break through those barriers. If you're seeing these ladies in your clinic, say, hey, not only I understand you don't have a service-connected disability, this may be someone who's a personnelist or someone who worked at a desk while they were downrange. These ladies need to know that there is help if they want it. Same thing for your male service members, too. Not everybody's a rough and tough, kicking down doors kind of person. So you really definitely want to make sure that they know, just because you weren't in combat specifically, you need to report these things, and there's help for you. This chart right here does show, I'll close this a little, pop up there, bring my arrow down. The one thing I really wanted to focus on here with this is your cohorts, males right here, your 18 to 29-year-olds. Okay, if you look down this column, this is suicide rates by calendar year, starting back in 2001. So in 2001, the rate was 33.9. You follow that up through here, you see a steady increase over time. So although the majority of suicides, just because of sheer numbers, may have been that 50-plus cohort, these 18 to 29-year-old guys, the folks you wouldn't think of all the time, I say they'll come into your clinic looking squared away, nice haircut still. These are rough and tumble guys. Sometimes they're at a risk. They've got some things they may need to talk about, and so it may take some prying. It may take several visits. Get to know them. In your clinic. They may be coming in for back pain or knee pain. Kind of try to get some information on their deployments, where they were, what they did. How did they lose a buddy, kind of deal. Really kind of try to draw this out, build that trust, so that they will. Male and female, so that they're more likely to talk to you and then seek care. And now that the VA will offer that to them, you can send them that way. Just so you know, the mechanism for suicides. This is 2001 to 2014. No surprise, firearms is the highest. So if you have someone who is maybe suicidal or showing symptoms of depression, PTSD, I know it's a touchy subject, but it doesn't hurt just to ask, do you have firearms in the house? Are they secure? Have you ever thought of hurting yourself? We ask these questions on our deployment health assessments. We screen folks prior to deploying and after deploying, and we do that. We give them 5 assessments per deployment. So we're constantly looking at this, and we're just aware that this is an issue. So they're used to being asked these questions. So don't be afraid to ask them in your civilian. Put the politics aside. Don't be afraid to ask these questions if you think it's something that needs to be covered. And here's your percent of your VA health users with a mental health or substance abuse disorder. And the big thing to take home is you can see a steady increase of folks who are coming in with both a mental health and a substance abuse diagnosis. In rural areas, drinking is definitely an issue in some places, so you need to be aware that our vets are at higher risk because of some of the things that may have happened downrange. And here's your suicide rate. Bipolar disorder right there, that's your blue line up top, that's your highest rate. And then your suicide rate for your mental health and substance abuse disorders is good news is that's more towards the bottom. But you definitely want to, again, know your population, know what their problems are, and really help them get care if they need it. This is something that's recognized but not addressed nearly enough, in my opinion. We're diving deep into this now into the military is sleep. There's such a strong connection between how much sleep you get and your overall emotional state, your physical state. Sleep is just one of those. It's like the X factor. You can have great nutrition and exercise, but if you're not getting enough sleep, your body's going to start breaking down. Whereas if you're getting adequate sleep, your nutrition and your exercise stuff, can be tweaked a little bit. But sleep is so important for regenerating, muscles, for healing, for just getting things straight in your head. And as talking from personal experience, once you've been deployed a few times, you just don't sleep. And in the military, it's not seen as anything unusual. So 24% of service members report getting more than 6 hours of sleep. The standard through the American Sleep Society, you know, seven hours or more is what we're really shooting for, but only 24% of our military population typically gets more than 6. So we definitely have a sleep issue, and I think that is one of the reasons why we have some of those problems that we're seeing with our mental health side of things. I know that's definitely, sleep is just, it's crazy. You're used to, you know, getting up every night at 2 in the morning because you just can't sleep anymore. That's going to wear on you after you've done that for 3 or 4 years. Chronic insomnia and sleep apnea, we've been trying to diagnose it and trying to help, but again, the sleep apnea and the insomnia, you know, I think sleep apnea is easier to take care of than the insomnia piece of it. And there is increasing evidence, of course, linking depression, anxiety, and alcohol abuse to poor sleep. It just is, and there's definitely opportunity for improvements there. So, you know, one of the questions definitely ask if you see guys coming in with all these issues is, how's your sleep? And then hopefully if there's a possibility, trying to get them some help with that. And the VA records, you know, this is data driven. So VA medical records do show an increased risk of suicide in those that report poor sleep. It's just all a big snowball. Chronic pain, mental disorders, no sleep, problems. It just wears on guys. So what are we doing to address this problem with access? We have rural vets. Access to care like other rural inhabitants we know is limited. There's lack of providers. Facility closures is still an issue. Distance to the VA facilities. You know, facilities that are co-located with things like women in their specialty service, you know, they're not very common, especially some of these smaller rural communities. So, and that is definitely something that veterans have expressed a need for, you know. So, you know, what we've tried to do is the Veterans Access Choice Accountability Act of 2014, but if you've been following this recently, that's running out of money quickly. So not sure how much longer that's going to be. They don't do something to kind of build that back up. It allows care at the community facilities so they don't have to, sorry about that, got a little ahead of myself. So they don't have to necessarily get care at a VA facility. If there's a town closer that may have some, you know, more resources in it, but it's not specifically related to the VA, they can still go there. And that's for anyone enrolled in VA healthcare on or before August 1, 2014. So if you're a recently discharged combat vet, you know, say you're within 5 years of separation, you can also get care there too. So it never hurts to ask these things and kind of get familiar with this. There is a office, VA Office of Rural Health, that deals with community outreach. There's lots of links on this page that can help rural providers get smart really quick on veterans' health issues, maybe have access to resources and tools and training, and they're specific to rural health content. There's VHA train courses with rural health specific, you know, focus. So, you know, you don't have to kind of fumble around trying to figure out what to do. Go to this website, Veterans Rural Health, VA Office of Rural Health, and there's some really good stuff there that I think can help you along the way. So, in conclusion, I know that was pretty fast and there's not a whole lot of time. You could dive into any of these issues a lot more, but for the sake of time, just want you to know that the demographics and the health profile of rural vets in your area is important. If you know that, you'll kind of get a better idea of what health services are appropriate. And, you know, fortunate or not, you know, rural vets and just rural population in general, some of these health needs tend to overlap. So, and you start saying, hey, there's a need in my veteran community here. Sometimes, yeah, you get a little bit more of an ear of your congressman or someone versus say, hey, there's a need in my rural community. There are specific needs for our next generation, you know, of these vets coming up, physical and mental. Definitely we've stressed the mental health more, and I think that really needs to be the focus when you see these guys and gals. Make sure you know that there are mental health services available, even if they're, say, have only done 5 years of service in the military, they don't have a service-connected disability, they don't meet the income requirements, you know, what have you. There are specific to certain events, they can get help, especially related to, you know, military sexual trauma, suicide, that type of thing. And, you know, this is a great resource, the VA office, for veterans and providers alike. So, again, questions doesn't do, but please feel free to email me any questions at heath.woockman@icloud.com. I am active duty military, so I track this stuff constantly. The vets are near and dear to my heart, especially the rural vets. Someday, hopefully, I'll be one. And just want to thank you for your time. And please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And this concludes my presentation.